From utility vehicle to war hero, Ukraine's Humvee story. The high-mobility multipurpose wheeled vehicle HMNWV, better known as the Humvee, was born in the late 1970s. The U.S. Army concluded that its aging fleet of Jeeps and light utility vehicles could not survive the demands of a modern battlefield. The service needed something faster, tougher, and far more versatile. In 1983, General won the contract to produce the high-mobility multipurpose wheeled vehicle, the HMNWV. The Army placed an initial order for 55,000 units. The first vehicles rolled off the production line that same year. The design philosophy was deliberate and uncompromising. Engineers built the Humvee around a single central principle: simplicity at scale, a wide, low-slung body sitting on a 16-inch ground clearance four-wheel drive as standard, a common chassis capable of supporting dozens of configurations from troop carrier to weapons platform to ambulance, without requiring fundamental structural changes. The vehicle was not meant to be the most powerful thing on the battlefield. It was meant to be everywhere on it, doing everything and still running when others broke down. Its combat debut came in Panama in 1989, followed by the Gulf War in 1991, where it proved its mobility across desert terrain that would have broken lighter vehicles. But it was the wars in Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan that exposed the platform's limits and ultimately drove its evolution. Improvised explosive devices and rocket-propelled grenades tore through early unarmored variants with devastating results, forcing a rapid and costly program to up-armor the fleet in the field. The lessons were painful. The response was the armored Humvee variants that today serve in Ukraine, heavier, better protected, and built specifically for the kind of close-range threat environment that has defined every major conflict since. By the time General delivered its 100,000th vehicle, the Humvee had become the defining image of American military mobility, exported to dozens of countries, license-built in multiple variants, and embedded in the doctrine of nearly every NATO partner army. Nobody expected that 4 decades after its first production run, it would be fighting its most demanding war, yet not in the desert but in the mud and snow of eastern Ukraine. Ukraine fields an estimated 6,000 Humvees across multiple branches of its armed forces, making it one of the largest operational fleets of the platform anywhere in the world. The vehicle was never designed for the kind of war Ukraine is fighting. It became essential anyway. That paradox sits at the heart of what Ukrainian forces have learned from more than 3 years of high-intensity combat. The HMNWV entered the full-scale war in February 2022. As a modest presence, it leaves each day's fighting more deeply embedded in Ukrainian military operations than before. Major Ire Simudin, of the Logistics Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, put the starting point plainly during the To Arms podcast by Militarny. At the start of the full-scale invasion, we had around 100 Humvees. Only 8 of them were officially purchased. The rest came as international military assistance. From that narrow base, the fleet grew rapidly as Western partners accelerated deliveries. The timing mattered. In 2022 and 2023, Ukrainian forces conducted a series of successful offensive operations against Russian positions, operations that depended directly on the speed and mobility the Humvee provided. Fast, light, and adaptable, the platform gave Ukrainian commanders a maneuver tool that heavier vehicles could not replicate. It was not the most protected option on the battlefield. It was often the most useful one. What Ukraine's experience has demonstrated above all else is the operational value of simplicity. The Humvee's design philosophy, built around ease of production, ease of repair, and modular adaptability, was established in the 1980s on a 21st century battlefield defined by drone surveillance, electronic warfare, and precision munitions. That philosophy has held up in ways its designers could not have anticipated. Simudin was direct about the platform's maintainability under frontline conditions. Today, there is no malfunction in a Humvee that we cannot fix. The only question is time and whether it is economically reasonable. That statement captures something rarely discussed in procurement debates: a vehicle that soldiers can repair themselves under fire with available tools and parts has a battlefield value that no specification sheet fully conveys. Ukraine's military has internalized that lesson. Ukrainian personnel increasingly prioritize simple, cost-effective, and robust platforms, vehicles that can take damage, be fixed quickly, and return to service without a deep level maintenance chain. The modular concept built into the Humvee's architecture amplifies that advantage. Units across the Ukrainian armed forces have adapted the platform for a wide range of missions. Logistics runs casualty evacuation, fire support, command and control, without requiring deep engineering changes. The vehicle was designed so that its core structure could support multiple configurations, and Ukrainian forces have exploited that flexibility to the maximum. Some Humvees operating with Ukrainian forces have ended up in Russian hands, lost to mine strikes, combat withdrawals, or the chaos of a front line that shifts without warning. Russian troops wasted no time putting at least one of them to the test. In a documented field evaluation, Russian soldiers subjected a captured Humvee previously in Ukrainian service and abandoned after a mine detonation to close-range gunfire. The vehicle's armored glass held firing at short range. The troops watched rounds fail to penetrate. The result surprised them. It was an unplanned but unambiguous verdict on a platform the Russian military had already acknowledged as representative of the superior armor characteristics of Western-made vehicles compared to their own counterparts. Ukrainian troops had long reported the same conclusion from the other side. Humvees supplied by allied partners had protected soldiers' lives during ambushes and mine explosions, allowing crews to withdraw from hostile areas, even in damaged vehicles. Ukraine's experience with the AM General-developed Humvee constitutes the most extensive real-world stress test the platform has undergone since its introduction. The data generated by 600 vehicles operating under sustained combat pressure against modern anti-armor weapons, drones, and electronic warfare systems represents exactly the kind of operational feedback that drives platform evolution. Whether AM General is capturing that data systematically remains an open question. Kyiv, meanwhile, is not waiting. Two domestic manufacturers have launched programs to develop vehicles in the same class as the armored Humvee, each drawing directly on frontline experience to define what the next generation of light tactical armor needs to look like. UKR Armotech has developed the Desna, a purpose-built armored vehicle on a custom chassis whose suspension geometry reflects the HMWV layout. The Desna measures 5,350 millimeters in length, 2,700 millimeters in width, and stands just 2,000 millimeters tall, proportions that prioritize cross-country mobility and a reduced battlefield signature ground clearance sits at 380 millimeters, and the vehicle can ford water up to 0.7 meters deep and clear vertical obstacles up to 0.3 meters. Power comes from a Cummins ISD 240 engine, delivering a specific output of 245 kilowatts per ton, enough to push the vehicle to a top speed of 120 km/h. The drivetrain pairs an Allison automatic transmission with a ZF transfer case, components that UKR Armotech has already validated in other platforms. The Desna carries a curb weight of 668 tons and a gross vehicle weight of 831 tons, making it a meaningfully heavier machine than the armored Humvee, which runs between 454 and 61 tons, depending on variant. Ingvar Defense is pursuing a different point on the weight spectrum. The company has begun engineering work on the Ingvar 2, a 7-ton light tactical armored vehicle built on a proprietary framed chassis. Artem Yushchuk, co-founder and CEO of Ingvar Defense, described the logic behind the program during a Militarny podcast. There is now a need for a new class of vehicles, faster, more maneuverable, possibly with a lower protection class. Our border guards still need heavy MRAPs because they face a very high number of mine strikes, and nearly half of all hits involve anti-tank mines. But for logistics, ammunition resupply, and crews of unmanned systems, different equipment is needed. That is why we want to expand our lineup so that our customer can choose the solution they need. The Ingvar 2 will be nearly half the weight of the company's existing Ingvar 3 and will meet STANAG 4569 Level 2 protection, meaning it can stop armor-piercing rounds up to 762 by 39 mm caliber. The design is modular, allowing configuration as either a 4-seat vehicle or a personnel carrier by swapping the cargo section for a troop compartment. Ingvar has not disclosed the engine or transmission choices, but the company states the concept calls for power plants with surplus capacity relative to the vehicle's weight, enabling high mobility. A proprietary suspension system is being developed to extract the full performance potential of that drivetrain. The Humvee's staying power in Ukraine is not nostalgia, it is a verdict delivered by soldiers who repair vehicles under fire and need them running again by morning. The platform's entire construction philosophy was built around simplicity and rapid production, a design logic that treats repairability not as a secondary consideration, but as a core combat capability. Ukraine's manufacturers are absorbing that lesson and embedding it into the next generation of vehicles they are building now. The war has not made the Humvee obsolete, it has reminded the defense world why the vehicle's original design principles still matter and shown that no replacement, however capable on paper, will displace a platform that soldiers can keep alive with their own hands.